Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Thriving Therapreneur podcast. I'm your host, Carly Hill, and today I am thrilled to introduce you to an amazing guest. Her name is Kayla Doss. She's a Canadian social worker, business coach, and she is the host of not only one, but two podcasts. She is a go getter, the Designer Practice podcast, and your Clinical Supervisor's Couch podcast. She's also the founder of the Canadian Clinical Supervision Therapist Directory, and that's what we're going to talk about today more in depth. And this is really a resource that's making waves for clinical supervisors and therapists across Canada. So I know most of you tuning in are from the States, but I have many, many Canadian clients that are looking to expand into coaching. So hello, my Canadian therapist friends. If you are listening today, this episode is going to bring so much value to you. Kayla has an incredible background in therapeutic recreation, social work. She's on a mission to help therapists design a private practice they love as well. You wear so many different hats, Kayla. Can you please introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit more about your journey? Welcome to the show, Kayla.
Thanks, Carly. And honestly, you did an amazing introduction for me, so I don't know what else to say. But as Carly said, my name is Kayla Das. I'm a registered social worker in Alberta, Canada. I'm from Newfoundland, Canada, originally. And even though this episode is going to be speaking about the Canadian Supervision Therapist Directory, there will be a lot of value for your American listeners in this episode too. So I just wanted to call you out, American listeners. You are seen here today as well. And I hope that anyone that also is providing clinical supervision services or a therapist a therapist looking for a clinical supervisor is going to be able to, have some takeaways from today.
Yeah. First off, I also just have to tell everyone I'm going to paint a picture. You look beautiful right now. You did your hair and your makeup, and I'm sitting here in my gym clothes because you had asked me last week when I was actually on your podcast, like, is this going to be video also? And I do put these on YouTube. So you got all dolled up, and I'm sitting here in a baseball cap. It's just funny. So everyone, watch the YouTube so you can see how beautiful Kayla looks. I digress. So let's talk about why you created this clinical supervision journey, why you even went down this journey in the first place, because I am a clinical supervisor myself. And I know that one, when I was trying to find a supervisor, it was pretty difficult. And then when I wanted to advertise my services for clinical supervision and I was putting myself on directories, there honestly wasn't that many directories that I could put myself on that I felt were actually worth it. I think we have more directories here in the States than you have, which is why you filled that gap and you created this directory, right? But it can be difficult, and it's definitely an area of need to connect therapists and supervisors. So would you mind just telling us, like, where did this idea come from? Are you a supervisor yourself? Or was this a challenge that you had to go through? Or are you just an innovator and you noticed the gap in the field? How did this come about?
I love that question. And there's actually a little bit of a journey that, if I look back, kind of brought me here, even though at the time I really didn't know this is where I was going to be. So, first of all, as a business coach, I'm often meeting with therapists and clinical supervisors, helping them grow their practices. And the constant theme that I hear is therapists having a difficult time finding clinical supervisors, and then clinical supervisors having spaces available for supervisees, and yet they can't find, people to fill their spaces. And I realize there's a gap into how clinical supervisors advertise their services, in addition with the lack of resources available for clinical supervisors to find therapists and vice versa. Specifically, like like you said, here in Canada, because there are a couple directories in the US, but here in Canada, there isn't any. So that was kind of, I guess, the idea of where it came from. However, when I first started my private practice, I also was looking for a clinical supervisor, kind of to tick that box, right? Because we think, our ethical standards tell us that we need to have either consultation or clinical supervision. But it took me a long time to find a clinical supervisor. And when I finally found one, I took the first one that I could find because that's the only one that I could find. And she was an amazing supervisor, although it wasn't a good fit. We didn't work with the same type of clients. We didn't work from the same type of therapeutic modalities. And I was just starting out in private practice, and I left every clinical supervision session feeling so defeated. I'm pretty sure I cried more at these sessions than anything. And it was because I just felt that I had no idea what she was talking about. I just felt like I was a bad therapist. But what it was is she come from therapeutic modalities and therapeutic orientation that I do not come from. And that's why it was all new information for me. However, later on, she was nice enough to say, you know what, Kayla, I think this is just not a fit. And I think you need to find another person to mentor you. And as a result, I found my next clinical supervisor who was fabulous. She worked in the same therapeutic modalities. I left feeling empowered, supported, and so forth. And I never really thought about it again until hearing the constant therapists trying to find clinical supervisors but can't, and then clinical supervisors trying to find therapists to fill those spaces but can't. And I'm like, yeah, this is more common than it needs to be. And I'm like, how can I help clinical supervisors connect with each other? And that's where the Your Clinical Supervisors Couch podcast come from, as well as the Canadian Supervision Therapist Directory as well.
Awesome. So it was born through your own experience, and I can so relate to this. I think it could be more easy to just find a supervisor, right? But finding a supervisor that is the right fit. Even back when I was in community mental health before I started my private practice and I was given a supervisor there, I didn't vibe with her because we didn't align with the type of ideal clients that we were seeing. Like, I had a heavy focus on kids and doing play therapy at the time, and just even the personality clashes, I feel like, weren't the best fit. And I remember they hired a new supervisor, and she was in her office, and I walked in and I demanded, I was like, you are going to be my new supervisor. And we're friends and colleagues to this day. We laugh about that story, but it is so incredibly important for our clinical growth to have the right fit for our supervisor. And you can go on Google, or you can go on Facebook groups, or you can word of mouth find a supervisor. But would you agree with me that this is one of the cons without having a directory, is you're kind of just dealt these cards that maybe worked for someone else but is not necessarily going to fit with you?
I would agree. Like, I think that by having a directory, it's a centralized location where someone can, find their fit, right? We'll talk about different ways that you can find a clinical supervisor, and we'll also talk about, the pros and cons of each. And there are pros in many ways. I mean, I did find a clinical supervisor without a directory. But in saying that, it's a centralized place where you can find, a supervisor that's a fit. You can, look through their profile. You can tell, what therapeutic modalities are they working from? Who are they working with? How many years of experience have they been working? Which therapeutic approaches are they working from? What is their approach to clinical supervision? Like, these are things that we took into consideration when creating the directory, because that is what a therapist or allied health professional would want to know when trying to find a clinical supervisor. And sometimes, even when we're finding people's websites, it's usually just kind of like a page off to the side of, I provide clinical supervision. And it's like not a whole lot of information about all of this information of, we want what's the approach to clinical supervision, or all of these types of things. So we kind of thought about it all so that that clinical that clinical supervisors and consultants can really advertise the information that their potential supervisees or other therapists want to see.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of reminding me, it's like the clinical supervision directory version of Psychology Today, where somebody could go on and they could, if they're trying to find a therapist, filter they want male or female. They have this insurance. They want in person or they want virtual. They have, this sort of problem that they're going through. Like, you're using systems and technology to your advantage to fill the gap and fill the void, right?
Exactly. And our directory has all of that. Like, you're able to filter by province, you're able to filter by profession, you're able to filter by keywords, right? Just type in, CBT, and CBT therapists are going to pop up. And again, we thought about all that because again, that different things matter to different therapists, but overall the whole goal is to find the right fit. So whatever that means, whether it's the person in the same province as you, to someone from the same profession as you, you can even have multiple keywords that you want to plug in, because maybe it's you want someone from your province, but you also want someone with CBT. So you can put in those multiple keywords to find clinical supervisors within that respect.
Mm-hmm. One challenge I remember when I was trying to find a supervisor when I started was none of the directories were up to date. I feel like they were all old, and I was like calling and emailing all of these supervisors, and I just wouldn't hear anything back, or their number wouldn't even be active. So, how are you solving that problem in making sure that the directory is always up to date?
Well, I love that. And what I say about that is usually when people are paying for a directory, they, are going to keep it either up to date or at least be available, right? And the reason is because they're constantly paying, every month or every year. Um, One of the challenges, and this is actually one of the cons with any clinical directory, with any therapist directory, whether it's for therapists or clinical supervisors, is that someone may actually have a full practice yet still pay for their listing, right? You might still reach out to someone. They either may not have a spot available, or they might not get back to you based on their own business practices. And unfortunately, that's something that's outside of the control of really any therapist directory. And that is one of the cons. But it's also the same con of, if you found them on their website, right? Because you could still reach out and still not get a response.
Mm-hmm.
Their Google business pages, you can still reach out and not get a response. But I like to believe if people are putting, like, investing into the directory, that they are actively accepting clinical supervisors, actively accepting therapists, and likely going to reach out to you and let you know that they have space, or reach out and say they don't.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually a problem too when I became a supervisor myself, where I got my training from. They offered it as like a bonus or like a part of the package where then I could be listed on their directory, right? But it was like lifetime access. Like, I guarantee I'm probably still on this directory, and I don't take therapists anymore for supervision. So that's a perfect example of, you pay for it one time, you get this lifetime access, or let's say you pay for a 5-year plan and things can change and you're no longer offering these services in your practice as a supervisor, yet you're getting all of these therapists' hopes up and they're reaching out to you and then they're just being ghosted, right? So the model of continuously paying and not having, you don't have like a lifetime option, do you?
No, we don't have a lifetime option. We have a yearly option, and then of course it renews the following year. Another thing, though, that you made me think about, uh, another issue with some therapist directories, again, clinical supervisor or therapist, is there's usually an algorithm connected with many of the therapist directories. And when you reach out, or like we'll just use like a therapist specific directory as an example. If a client was reaching out to you, sometimes they'll put their name into a form and they'll kind of give you a little bit of information. Sometimes that algorithm is meant to filter out spam. So as a result, sometimes it actually filters out real clients. And then so some clients will reach out and say, I reached out to this person, but you as a therapist never got that email because that filter had filtered it out as spam. Our directory actually is a little different, that we don't have that set up. We actually just let you advertise your phone number, your website, your social media platforms, whatever it is on the platform, so that people have to reach out to you directly. Now they can click on the link to your website, but it shows your website URL, that it's not getting kind of saved or tracked through our system. It's literally, you know, if I'm reaching out to Carly, I'm going to carlyhillcoaching.com. I'm not putting my information into a form that then gets filtered out by spam. Now, if that person's
Mm-hmm.
website has a spam filter, might be a little different, but that's outside of our control, because we do know that's it's a pro and a con to therapist directories. Is that, I mean, therapists don't want spam, but then it also sometimes removes actual clients because it identifies it as spam.
Right. Makes perfect sense. It's genius. What other cool features? I'm really curious because you just launched this not too long ago, right? And we talked about how, you're using technology and you're leveraging technology where they can filter by province, theoretical orientation, whether they want like individual or group sessions. So you have all of that down. What other cool features do you have that most directories don't have? Maybe we can talk about SEO for a minute as well, because I know you're big on SEO in all of your business endeavors, actually, um, and how showing up on Google, on the first page of Google, is going to be beneficial for these supervisors as well, and a win-win where it's going to help the therapist. Is there any other features that are coming to mind with your directory?
Yeah, well, like I said, we really thought about what do therapists want and what do clinical supervisors need to advertise. So, at least here in Canada, there isn't a directory. So we're kind of got all the features, that no other therapist direct or no other clinical supervisor directory has, because we're the only one. But something that we do have that a lot of therapist directories don't is we even allow you to advertise your hours of operation, right? It's almost like a listing, like a business listing. And that's really helpful because I just know myself as a therapist, if I'm looking for a clinical supervisor and maybe I'm working Monday to Friday in a full time job. And then I'm doing, my private practice after hours. But then the clinical supervisor doesn't have any evening hours. I'm going to want to know that. So I don't want to waste that clinical supervisor's time. But I also, know if their hours of operation are not evening, it's not going to be helpful. So as a result, we allow you to advertise your hours. You can just keep it as any time, because maybe you're someone who might make exceptions for specific people, or you might have many hours. You don't necessarily have to use it. You can just say I'm available anytime during the week. But this can be really helpful because, again, it's for the clinical supervisor. If you have a lot of people reaching out and they all want evening and you can't provide it, you're spending a lot of time doing those consults or those chats, and you already can't fulfill this person's needs. So that's one feature we added in. We also include who you provide clinical supervision for. So even though I'm using the word clinical supervision kind of interchangeably, but as we know, sometimes people provide clinical supervision and clinical consultation. So clinical supervision is for someone who, isn't yet qualified to provide therapy, whereas clinical consultation is someone who is available. Clinical consultation is for someone who, is a full-fledged therapist, but they're looking for ongoing consultation with respect to that. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
stop for a second because I don't know if you hear the ambulance in the background?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's
Okay,
going.
I think they're gone now. Okay. We'll pick up here. Um, Another neat thing that we have as well is, at least here in Canada, some people have different credentials. So maybe you're an EMDR consultant, or maybe you have the RCSW credential, which is kind of like the LCSW credential uh, in the US. However, only certain provinces have that here. With that, you might want an RCSW clinical supervisor. And so we allow you to be able to list those special designations that you hold, because again, a supervisee, if they're just completed their EMDR training, may want a EMDR consultant, and they can easily see it on your dashboard, on your profile, so that, excuse me, they can easily see it on your listing, and they know that you're the right fit. So we've really, really worked hard at how can we make this a good fit.
Yeah, you have thought of everything. It seems like this is very well thought out. I'm really excited for you in this journey. It's been amazing watching you grow and support therapists in so many different ways. For all the Canadian listeners, where can they check out the Canadian Clinical Supervision Therapist Directory? Where can they find more information about this?
Yeah, so they can find it at the, sorry, it's like literally right out my door. We never have ambulances, but there's obviously one like
It's okay.
right outside my door. Okay, it's gone. Sorry. So listeners can find it at the Canadian Clinical Supervision. Sorry. Listeners can find it at canadianclinicalsupervision.ca. Um, One side note, because again, we'll cut this out, but did you want me to go through those five ways to find a clinical supervisor? Because I thought that's what we are going to do, but if not, that's fine too.
I mean, I feel like we already alluded to all of them because we talked
Okay.
about like word of mouth, we talked about Facebook groups, and we talked about Google. So I don't really think it's
Okay.
necessary. I feel like we already actually covered all of those points if you go back and
Okay,
uh,
perfect. So maybe the
listen.
one,
Yeah, I had it up, but we've covered it all.
okay. So maybe the one thing to cut out at the beginning of the episode was that I did mention this will be valuable to American listeners, because I thought we were going to go through it, and it may not be as valuable as I thought it was going to be for American
Okay,
listeners. But
no
okay, so
problem.
I'm gonna pick up. There's one thing you mentioned though about the SEO, so I think I'm gonna kind of go back there before I say uh, the email, just or the website, just because I think that might be helpful too.
Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned earlier, you asked me about SEO, because I am such an SEO nerd and I absolutely love SEO. So, when we think of some therapist directories, and Psychology Today has such high SEO. Like, it's been around forever. If you look it up on like for domain authority, it's like 90 something. And they spent a lot of time with SEO. Now we are a newer listing. We are a newer website. So as a result, we're still building our SEO. But what's really great about the Canadian Supervision Therapist Directory is the Canadian Clinical Supervision Therapist Directory is that we don't have any competition. So if you look us up, we're already ranking on the first page of Google when you're looking up like clinical supervision content. Also, because SEO is something that I've been implementing in my own business for years, we create lots of content. So we have obviously the Your Clinical Supervisor's Couch podcast, so that gets listed on our website, which also helps our SEO. We have weekly, sometimes we try to do it twice a week, blogs that are high topics for clinical supervision and clinical consultation, to help improve our SEO. Because again, as a clinical supervisor, if you're looking to list, you going to want this directory to be ranking. Otherwise, you're going to be paying money for no reason. So we know that, and we actually have been implementing this strategy since September of last year, even though the directory has only been live since the end of January. So we've been implementing our SEO strategy even before we went live, so that we already were ranking before we even went live. So So that's something that we put into place. We really thought about it, instead of just saying, "Hey, here's a directory, and now we're going to start building," because then you're not going to see any supervisees come in from that. And then, as a result, we make sure that you get, or we're hoping that you'll get supervisees with that. So you did mention also, you said, like, how do people connect with this directory? So our website is canadianclinicalsupervision.ca, and it's free to search through listings if you're a therapist, Canadian therapist wanting to search. Even if you're American, you just want to look, just kind of see what it's all about, feel free. And then if you're a clinical supervisor, monthly it's low subscription rates. We do have monthly and we have yearly subscriptions, and you can cancel at any time. So there's no, commitment. Obviously, if you sign up for a year, you're kind of, committing to a year. But if you want to be taken down before that, you can. We don't provide refunds for a year subscription, but in saying that, hopefully you're still wanting to be a clinical supervisor for that year. But you can also just go on our monthly subscription. If you cancel, you can easily sign up for another profile in the future. So maybe you fill up your clinical supervision sessions and you're like, you know what, I don't need the directory anymore. You can cancel and sign up again in the future.
I love that. Yeah, you weave in flexibility. I will include all of this information in the show notes as well, so you can easily click on that and check out the directory. But thank you again, Kayla, for being on this show. And until next time, Therapreneurs, I will see you in the next episode. Take care.